You just heard Debt of Pain from Holy Terror's Mind Wars, 1988. This is Thrash Extravaganza, number 7, Holy Terror, Terror in Submission, and Mind Wars. Requiem Metal Podcast. I'm Mark.
And I'm Jason. I like to give him more and more complicated, runs of words that he has to put together. So
when I'm hearing myself slap back in the headphones too, it makes it even more difficult.
Oh, yeah, you get echo effect and stuff. So yeah, we are recording one more. Hopefully, this and our patron show that we should be recording in the next couple of days for those of you that are patrons. Hopefully, the last couple virtual shows that we have to do. We had a little bit of scares that we talked about in the Snow White one, and we're. I'm definitely in the free and clear and all that stuff, and I think Mark is as well. So hopefully the next time we won't have the echo in Mark's ear throwing him off a little bit.
But yeah, it's been actually using the Zoom. Actually sounds pretty good.
Yeah. I listened to some of the Snow White episode, and I didn't get any complaints on social media about it. In fact, I got a lot of really nice compliments on some of the topics that we covered on that, and so the really good feedback that I've been getting from the Thrash stuff. I just joined a Facebook Thrash page 2 days ago, and a guy was talking about violence, and so I posted something about our episode that we did, and he was freaking out. He's like, "Holy shit!" And then he's like, "I'm gonna sign up and be a patron now." He's like, "I'm listening to episode 150," and he just awesome. It was instantaneous. Yeah, so it was pretty cool. But and then another weird kind of update is Tony Scaglione from Whiplash got a hold of me and loved the episode, and he was like, there are a couple things that you guys kind of parts of stories that were a little off, and I said, hey man, if you want to tell me, feel free to write me, and I'll give an update and clarify anything. I said, hey, I'll be honest with you, there's a lot that is hard to find online about you guys, and he just sort of laughed at that. He goes, yeah, I know. So that was pretty cool. It's always cool when you hear from the band members that they dig what we're doing and stuff like that. So, I know Henke from Dawn reached out a couple times, and so did who's the lead singer of Witchery?
Toxine.
Yeah, and both those guys have reached out to me and been like fucking love the episodes and blah blah. Toxine's like, hey, if you ever want some inside baseball about what happened with me and Witchery, I'll tell you and stuff. So I'm like, all right, maybe down the road.
Yeah. Alan from Primordial got a hold of us and years ago, but said he enjoyed the episode.
Yep, because we did 2 parts on Primordial, I believe. So.
But, then he was asking me about podcasting because he started his own.
Oh yeah, I saw that. Yeah, but anyways, it's cool. That's always it's fun when you get a little bit of kind of validation and stuff like that. And there were a couple conversations that people tagged me in the last week or so where, they were talking about I can't remember who it was, but I think it was happening on Twitter, and they were just kind of saying how much they appreciate the fact that we don't do the oh, this next song's fucking rad, man,
so fucking heavy, so killer.
That we kind of take a completely different tone than that and stuff, So I don't know, that was cool. I'm trying to see if I can.
I'm glad people are picking up on that, so that's good.
Yeah, he says, they're calm. So he's in a conversation with another person. He's tagging me. He says, they're calm and collected when they're discussing. Not a huge fan of listening to podcasts that's got some guy yelling, oh, yeah, man, this album will chop your fucking head off. Pass me a bud and stuff. So, and then the same guy, he goes, it's Funeral Drones. I don't know what his first name is, but on Twitter, and he just says, Requiem Podcast does such a great job of deconstructing records and bands. Probably the best metal podcast I've ever heard. And then, and then the other guy he's talking to is like, yeah, man, the best. I've been on that one since the early days. So apparently it's old fans have been around. I don't recognize their names because they use alter egos on Twitter. So I don't know.
Yeah,
could even be patrons for all I know. I'm not 100% sure. So
I'm curious what our demographics are. If they're now trending more, 40-plus-year-old men.
I the other day I was looking. I think I found a way for Spotify to do a demographic breakdown and stuff like that. And
oh no shit!
Yeah, I'll have to like screenshot it for you. I might have even screenshot it on my phone and send it to you and stuff. I don't know how I got there. I think it was part of like the Spotify end of year type thing. I just clicked on the button or something and like got, something about how to break down your podcast demos and stuff like that. And it was cool. There was some like good info there. I mean, we tend, towards like older males, but we did have some female viewership on Spotify at least. And again, Spotify is like a piece of the puzzle because obviously more people are downloading us in other podcasting apps than they do on Spotify. But but we get probably, it felt like around, if my memory serves, like roughly like 1,000 plus on Spotify. And then that's coupled with like, where we're at. I think some episodes we've done, I've seen like the talk show thing is like 10,000 plus. Yeah. So I mean,
I think we've got a pretty good penetration out there. I mean, we could probably have some type of sponsor, but I'd rather kind of keep going how we are.
Someone wrote me about that the other day actually, and was like, how do you guys not run into like copyright issues? And I was like, well, we don't ask that question out loud very often, but we also don't flirt with like making too much money through advertising off of it, which is why we rely on Patreon so much, Yeah,
we make no money on advertising.
Yeah, exactly. Even though they started to advertise on Apple at the very beginning of episodes for us, but
that we don't get any of that technically, so we don't.
This podcast sponsored by, and I'm always laughing like, okay,
by Blue Cross and Blue Shield.
Yeah, cool, man. I'd love some of that Blue Cross Blue Shield money. So.
Hey, give me some fucking insurance, dude.
Yeah, exactly.
I feel like I've already made that joke once.
Yeah, did we? We were trying to get Patreon to sponsor Mark with their insurance.
Yeah, I think it was a couple episodes ago.
But no, I've just been doing the virtual teaching thing. Mark's been doing some, side work, plumbing, artwork, all that kind of stuff. I've had a really weird weekend of movie watching. I've gone from like one extreme to sort of like another. I watched Society for the first time. It was on my list.
It's a good one.
Yeah, that third act is I knew about the third act, but it was still pretty
notorious.
And then I watched like the most notorious war movie like ever made that I've owned for years, but I just didn't have the guts to sit and watch it. And it's that Russian film, Come and See. That's just like fucking harrowing, but it's incredible. It's like Tarkovsky meets like, I don't know, the violence of the opening of Saving Private Ryan with like some of like the poetry of Thin Red Line or something like that. It's like, but it's not war porn. It doesn't like glorify any of that. It's very unglorious in a way.
How old is it?
83, 84, something like that. But I was telling my roommate that the legend of that movie is that the kid who's the star of the movie, who you see like the war through his eyes, that his hair actually started to turn white during the movie because it was like such a stressful experience and like it scarred him so much. They actually tried to give the kid like hypnosis so that he wouldn't have like permanent like damage from like the fucking movies. Like it's crazy. Like
God.
it's an incredible film. Like it might be the best war movie I've ever seen, but it's not something you want to sit and watch, but you're happy to get it. It kind of reminds me of like if you did like an adult like super adult version of like the same feelings you get from like Grave of the Fireflies, the anime film. Mm-hmm. Like it takes some of that and then just goes like to this like awful place, what is war on like the not just the soldiers, but more importantly, like on everyone else,
Yeah.
But yeah, then I went from there to like, I don't know, just watching like Ted Lasso. Have you heard of that show on Apple Plus?
Is that the Jake and Sudeikis thing, or Jason Sudeikis?
Yeah, it's like the most like endearing, like upbeat. It reminds me, like it kind of reminds me of like Cobra Kai in that it's like got this like sort of naivety and like hopefulness, but like it's mixed with like a little bit of like the Friday Night Lights kind of aspect, and it's like the fish out of water. He's just like like country bumpkin from Kansas that's like coaching a Premier League team in like England and shit. So I don't know. It's actually cool. I marathoned the whole series last night, and it's like I think I need it to feel good after like watching like Society and like Come and See. But like if anybody was like trying to figure me out, like I don't know. Like, that's just such a weird roller coaster ride to be on. And then I was like grading some papers earlier, waiting to podcast, and I was like watching 10 Things I Hate About You, which is like a late 90s teen comedy remake of Shakespeare Taming of the Shrew with like fucking Heath Ledger and shit like that. Like, it's like, so like, it's like Clueless, you know, or something, but like, I don't know. So I've been on like a weird roller coaster ride of like just weird shit, man. So I don't know. I don't know if you've been watching anything absurd lately, but that's
last night I watched The Wild Women of Wongo. It's like some real shitty 1950s like tiki tribe movie.
Oh, nice. All right, nice.
I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. It's an experience, but
just an experience. Yeah. I watched the old one movie I watched lately was like a old 30s flick with Peter Lorre. I think it was his first American movie after he did M for Fritz Lang, and it's basically God, I'm trying to remember what it's called, but it's basically like a remake, like an American remake of The Hands of Orlok. That German expressionist film where like the dude fuses the hands of like a serial killer onto this like piano player who's been in a bad accident, and like the fucking hands are like making him do like violent things and shit like that. But
just like Jeff Fahey later on would go on with Body Parts.
There you go. Yeah, which is I think a kind of a remake of this and Hands of Orlok, which are these famous movies. I think Hands of Orlok was Murnau that did Nosferatu. I'm pretty sure.
Sounds right.
I have it. I haven't watched it yet. I have like a German expressionist like box set that I got like 6 months ago. I just haven't, you got to be in the mood for like solid German films, But anyways, that's my old movie that I've kind of watched. That's kind of a weird one. But Peter Lorre is great in it, man. He's fucking like off the rails, just nuts. So,
absolutely. Before
he did Casablanca and shit. So. But yeah. So that's what Mark and I have been up to in the past week or whatever. So, Christmas break is looming though. It's remember that energy when you were a kid, like going into that final week before Christmas break it's
been a while. Yeah.
Yeah. But like, you can feel like that tension. And I think with all the other like accelerations of virtual and shit, I think like, it's just going to be this giant relief when we get to like Christmas break where nobody has to do any bullshit online for 2 weeks, and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like a nice feeling. So
my niece and nephew are both doing remote right now, and it's without my like mom helping them. I don't know how they would navigate it. It's a mess.
I don't envy parents on the other end. High school is one thing because kids can kind of figure it out themselves. But I've got one kid that like will turn on the Google Meet. And then like we'll end class like a half hour earlier. I'll be like, hey, go watch this documentary on your own because it's going to be way better you watching it on your computer than me like broadcasting it where it's like lagging and shit like that,
Yeah.
And then like this one kid never hangs up. And I know that what they're doing is they're just like turning their computer on, like logging in so that they're taking attendance. And then they just like go do something else. I'm hoping it's like drugs or something, but and then this person just keeps emailing me with like inane questions that I clearly answered in class, and I just want to reach through the like laptop and like shake this person. So, but yeah, so otherwise,
not an ideal form of learning for sure.
No, but high school kids should know better at this point. I mean, it's just I'm teaching juniors and seniors. Like, you know what? Just get through this. You know what I mean? Like, it sucks. We get it. It sucks for everyone, but like, how to play school. It's one thing like elementary kids, like that's a different story, man. Or even middle school kids. But at a certain point, it's like just punch the card, move on. So. But Holy Terror, man. Let me tell you. This was when I went through and really broke these records down. It was a couple weeks ago when I thought we were going to do a kind of a marathon recording session. So I kind of had my notes ready, and it was a whole like day that I really took and spent with this band because, I've had Holy Terror for a few years. Mark and I were talking before we hit record that I actually got him the vinyl of it might have just been Mind Wars. I don't know if it was both Mind Wars and Terror and Submission. So I'm not.
Well, they've got the compilation album of everything called Total Terror. I didn't remember if that's what it was or not. But
yeah, I think it's the actual. I think what I got you was Mind Wars. Maybe it had both in it. I have the Total Terror like CD box set that has got 4 discs and a DVD of them playing at Milwaukee. I don't know if it's Milwaukee Metal Fest, but it's just some like live shows and shit. But yeah, it's, I don't know. I've had it for years, but at the same time, like every time I put the band on, like I know that I like it, but it's very dense to sort of like sift through and like collect my thoughts. And finally,
it was pretty tough.
Yeah. I was, you kind of texted me and were like, hey, can we push this a little bit? Like I need more time. And I was like, yeah, I can relate, because I remember the day that I just tried to like, I threw myself into the point where I got it, but it was like, it was like a whole day kind of affair on like a Saturday or something like that.
It took like a couple listens just to like kind of wrap your head around a little bit, like kind of get a rough idea and figure, where they're coming from. But then just trying to like say something about it, that's the problem. Like Sure. You got to listen to it enough to be able to go through and like pick things out that make sense and make it interesting and unique.
Yep. And I think I kind of cracked the code on them a bit. And then I also, at the same time, we reached out, as we'll get to later in the episode, we reached out to our friend who's good at understanding technical, dense music, Mr. Jeff Wagner from Radical Research Podcast. And
Dr. Jeff Wagner.
Dr. Jeff Wagner, yeah. And the Mean Deviation book and the Peter Steele book and lots of other things. He's actually working on a Voivod book right now. And his like little thing that he recorded for us that we'll play later, like even he has trouble articulating a lot of it, because I think there is something like there's this je ne sais quoi about Holy Terror that I think is what adds to kind of like a legendary status of them a bit.
Yeah.
I think like kind of like that mid-period era of Voivod, where they were still doing thrash, but it was like confounding. Like I kind of get why like Jeff Wagner loves this band so much, because they have like a Voivod quality to them, or like, and they're not like progressive tech death or tech thrash stuff like Psychotic Waltz or whatever. They're not quite in that territory, but I can see how they like fall into that camp or have the appeal of those kind of bands,
Yeah, I mean, I think they probably hold more in common with the Dark Angel than almost anybody else, as far as like the being unpenetrable, being fast.
Yep.
I didn't really pay a whole lot of attention to lyrical content or anything, but
I have some things to say about their lyrics later on, so
okay.
So don't worry about that. But yeah, it's a lot to take in, because you're the vocalist, Keith Dean, as you sort of heard there on Dead of Pain, is like, he's not a normal thrash metal vocalist by any means. And that's kind of what adds to, I think, his quality. He was coming at it, as we'll kind of talk about more, but he was not even like a really that much of like a heavy metal guy. He was a hard rock guy. And
that makes a lot of sense then.
He was confused almost by like what he was supposed to do. And that almost like worked better. Right? Like it's almost a collection of these like disparate guys that are coming from like 5 other bands. And basically you're saying like, all right, like we're going to do this style of music, but I want you to basically play the way that you would have played in your original band. And just, we're going to like push all this stuff together and kind of see how it sort of works, I mean, Dead of Pain, the reason I started with that song is kind of where the origin of this band sort of starts with, but that was basically a remake of Agent Steel song called Back to Rain. That's from the first Agent Steel record, Skeptics, Apocalypse. And the main guy who is Holy Terror, that we'll talk about in a moment, is Kirk Kilfeld, one of the guitarists, and he came from Agent Steel. And so he brought that song kind of with him, and then sort of does a new version of it with this Dead of Pain. And like the original is like a killer version. I listened to it. It's very Nawabum-y, which is kind of what Agent Steel is, like a kind of speed metal meets Nawabum type thing. And, it like he plays it like way faster. It's darker. It's more introspective. Dean's vocals like add like a whole completely different sort of thing. They really cut all the fat out of what you would have heard in the Agent Steel sort of song, and they get like right to the point. And
is there like there's no remnant of how the other vocal approach was?
No, because and we'll hear in the next song we're gonna play here in a second, the Agent Steel song, like that vocal style is so much different. I don't know if I wrote the vocalist down. Actually, it's the vocalist, I believe, that had a big conflict with Kurt. Like they were butting heads a lot, and that's why Kurt eventually like couldn't deal with his like ego, I guess, and that's why he left Agent Steel.
Okay.
But yeah, that guy has more of a like traditional like kind of priest type vocal.
That's pretty great.
You know. But yeah, like, I mean, Dead of Pain, you've got like almost this kind of like Slayer, Evil Has No Boundaries kind of riff built into it a little bit too, which I think is cool because we keep coming back to like how influential like Show No Mercy and Hell Awaits and Haunting the Chapel were on a lot of these bands that we've been sort of covering in this series. But
yeah, there's some Possessed as well.
Yeah, yep, a little bit of that. And I don't know how much they were into that. They were into Slayer for sure. I'm not sure if they were like Possessed guys much or whatever, but
I think just by virtue of how fast they are, there's certain things that people rely on. Like,
yeah,
stylistically.
For sure. So the band itself, we're talking Keith Dean, and Keith Dean sadly passed away in 2012, and that probably with that goes any chance of reunions of some sort, you know. And I think Wagner like addresses that later, that they're one of the few bands that when they broke up, and that was it. And
they tried to get back together, I guess, in 2005.
Oh, did they? Okay.
Yeah, well, according to Metal Archives, but
got it. Yeah, but
who really wants to see him without, like, I don't know. Keith is kind of one of the main points of the band that I think is really super interesting.
Yep, absolutely. He's definitely like one of the kind of X factors of the band a bit.
The way like he plays around with his vocal patterns that are completely counter to, he's almost like a third guitar line. It's not like a traditional vocal line at all.
Yep. And especially like the production, which we heard on Mind Wars is good. But the production in Terror and Submission is like, it's the guy didn't know metal, and you can kind of tell. So like you can hear really like cool parts like emerging. I still think it's an awesome record, but it's just kind of muddier, you know, than it probably needs to be. His Mind Wars is a little clearer and a little bit more. And so I think his vocals shine a little bit more on Mind Wars because it's produced the right way. But yeah, he's definitely like kind of in the mud, and almost serving, like you said, like an instrument in a way on Terror and Submission, you know. But then we got Kurt Kilfeld from Agent Steel, and Mike Alvord is the other guitar player. And basically he I'll get to the story in a second, but he came from another band previous called Black Widow, and Black Widow were on Metal Massacre 3 alongside Slayer and Snow White. So they were I mentioned that in the Snow White episode that Metal Massacre 3 was going to come up again in a later episode, and here we are. So
there it is.
Yeah, and I think he was also part of Fatal Error. I have that written down, but I don't know the timeline of that. Maybe that was a song that was on. Yeah, I don't know. And then Floyd Flannery on bass. And then originally it wasn't Joe Mitchell, but Joe Mitchell is who you hear on Mind Wars and Terror and Submission. And basically the original drummer was Jack Schwartz, who had come from or just recently left Dark Angel. And he had recorded the We Have Arrived record, the debut that doesn't have Hoagland on it. And so he's kind of in search for kind of a new band. And then he hooks up with Kurt, who's just left Agent Steel. And I think they formed in 85. And Jack Schwartz and Kurt kind of get together. And Schwartz was in the band until 87. And they literally like kicked him out like right as I think they were about to record Terror and Submission. I don't think he's on Terror and Submission. Looking at the liner notes, I can't find it, but yeah, I'm pretty sure Mitchell drums on that one. And they basically get signed by another cool story about
Mitchell does drum on that.
Okay, yeah, so he's for sure on that. Yep. So I knew Schwartz was playing a lot of Schwartz is on all the demos up until Terror and Submission. But they brought in Floyd. Okay, and Floyd was from a band called Thrust, and I believe I have a Thrust song on the Heavy Metal Countdown. I forgot to look, but I think
I can picture what their logo looks like without even saying.
Yeah. So that's where he came from, and then he originally, Kurt tried to get Juan Garcia to come with him from Agent Steel, and Juan Garcia was the other guitar player there, but Garcia stayed on for like another record or so, and then Garcia will actually go off and form Evil Dead, another kind of thrash band that. Anyway, so it's like this weird stuff kind of coming together. And then basically Jack Schwartz recommended Mike Alvord, who was the other guitar player. So, and then Kurt was like a big Maiden guy and Mike Alvord was like a big Motorhead guy. And so they kind of brought these like two different kind of metal approaches in, Nawabum versus this kind of like speed metal, kind of raw sort of thing happening.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Schwartz is coming from Dark Angel. And so, you're throwing all this kind of stuff together. And then basically what happened is they threw together a demo in 86, and that got them signed with the Under One Flag. But that was for records that were going to be released in Europe only. All right. And so Under One Flag, I believe, is part of Music for Nations.
I think so.
Yeah. So
I used to have, I'm trying to think of some of the...
There's a lot of bands I looked.
Is there like some Creator on there too?
I believe so. Yeah, I think there were a lot of bands that were on the Under One Flag because I think a lot of the bands that had American records that wanted them released in Europe, that's who they had to kind of go through was Music for Nations Under One Flag.
Okay.
It's kind of how it worked. And basically then the manager of DRI managed them and got them Road Racer distro in the US for Terror and Mind Wars. And so Road Racer released some of their stuff in the US, but they were really technically signed to Under One Flag.
Okay.
Yep.
Do you think Schwartz had any kind of did he like develop some type of complex about being fired as a drummer?
Yeah, I don't know, because basically here's what I got from it, and this is kind of a little interesting story. Basically, it says after recording the demo and starting to shop it around, which got Music for Nations interested, there was kind of a power struggle that was going on between Jack and Kurt over who controlled the business of the band. And apparently Jack went out behind the back of the band and struck a deal with Music for Nation without any of their knowledge. And the contracts were sent over, and it had Jack's name on the contracts. Ooh. And that was sort of the final straw. And so that's when Jack gets kicked out. And then that's when they find Joe Mitchell, who was from North Carolina but living in LA. And what's cool is like there's a story of where they like brought in Joe Mitchell and where they had just got done basically finding the vocalist. Why can't I think? Oh, Keith. Yeah. And they had auditioned Keith, and Keith was like, he did some stuff and sang, and then he was like, yeah, I'm not really into this. And they're like, no, dude, you have to be our vocalist. He's like, yeah, but this is not really my style. And they're like, we don't care. Like, that's why we want you kind of thing. And he's like, all right. So he like reluctantly joined the band, even though he wasn't like a speed metal thrash dude at all. And the same thing happened with Joe. Joe comes in and he says like, guys, like, I know how to drum, but I don't know anything about speed metal or thrash. And Kurt basically sits him down and just like plays Hella Waits for him and says, I just want you to play like this. And Joe goes, okay, I guess. Like, and so it's really weird how this band kind of came together. And so
I think without those types of, those happenings, like the band wouldn't even be remembered.
Sure. Exactly.
That's like kind of what made them.
Yep, absolutely. But before we go too much further, let's give listeners a little sample of what the Agent Steel song, the sound kind of comes from, because being that Kurt is the main songwriter, I think it makes sense for, he wrote every song except for one on Terror and Submission. Then he wrote the majority, I think, of Mind Wars. And so it's kind of his vision. He's the Steve Harris kind of the band. And so I kind of want listeners who maybe aren't familiar with Agent Steel to sort of get a sense of like where he's kind of coming from. And so this is kind of a Talkset part 1 of 2 for our opening set. So we're going to kind of go and play a tune for you. It's the Agents of Steel from Agent Steel tune. And basically what Agent Steel was how familiar are you with them? Do you have that Skeptics Apocalypse record?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that was, God, one of the, I think I got that 10, 12 years ago.
I thought you got it when we were living together. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Because I think that's when it got reissued. And that's when I was like going on all those like FTP sites and finding all those like weird old records and showing them to you. I was like, oh, man, they're like all those like Mantis demos and shit like that. I was like, yeah, man.
Yeah, and Fenrir was talking about them too.
Oh, was he? Yeah, I think he's a huge fan of them. Yeah. They were sort of like the American version of like Exciter or Razor a little bit. Like they were,
I think, way more interesting or way more immediate for me.
Well, they're definitely more like, to me, they remind me of that first Exciter record. It's like speed metal, just like energetic, but it's more dynamic. It's a lot more Nawabum, I think, than maybe Razor and Exciter had.
It's more frantic.
Yeah, it's got a lot of like destruction, kind of off the rails kind of speed, Sodom, Destruction, Creator, some of that kind of stuff to it.
Yeah, and vocally it's more akin to like, geez, like King Diamond meets a little bit of like,
Priest and some of that kind of stuff. It's more high pitched.
Like a little bit of Jeff Tate-isms even.
Yeah, I can see
some of the phrasing's kind of weird.
Yeah, for sure. But there's even like something like still kind of sinister too. There's like a little bit early Slayer there that gives them like a little bit of edge more than like, I don't know, more than some bands of that ilk or whatever. And like this song we're going to hear, I mean, you'll hear it right away. It's like, it's anthemic, it's intense, it's all those kind of things. And so
Masters of Metal, Agents of Steel.
Agents of Steel. Yeah, good stuff. So, all right, so let's listen to Agents of Steel from Skeptics Apocalypse. Then we'll come back and talk a little bit more about Holy Terror.
And see if you can hold out the scream as long as he does at the end there.
Yeah, I can't.
Agents of Steel,
Sweet. There was Agents of Steel from Agents Steel. So, yeah, I mean, that was 85 is when that came out. I think I forgot to mention that. And so pretty much right afterwards is when Kurt left and kind of, put together Holy Terror and start putting the pieces together. And so what's really interesting, just to kind of give you a little bit of the band story sort of now, because it's kind of relevant, I guess, is basically this whole deal with Road Racer is what's going to sort of end up giving the band kind of problems. And I was always like kind of wondering why this band just did these two, like, flamed out after like two like really amazing records and then just like done, Yeah. And so as I was doing research, I kind of put the pieces together. I found a lot of really cool interviews with Mike Alvord, who seems pretty chatty. He's the main guy that's interviewed, I believe, in that Vice article that I sent you as well.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure he's one of the big talking points of it. But this interview was from No Echo. It was a website I found, a guy named Carlos Ramirez, and it was from 2016, so relatively updated. But basically, he talked about that they wanted to get their records more known in America, and they felt like Road Racer might be the sort of way to go, but even to get them maybe off of Music for Nations. And at that time, the manager for DRI took over managing them as well, and that's what originally kind of created that Road Racer relationship and got them distribution in the US. All right, but they kind of Road Racer wanted them to sign a contract with them to release their next 3 records, not just in the US, but their next 3 records after Mind Wars, also in Europe. And basically, they signed that with Road Racer without telling Music for Nations. And Music for Nations sent them on their second European tour with Nuclear Assault and Exodus. And Under One Flag called them up and said, hey, we'd like to get a contract going for the next record, the 3rd record and beyond. And they're like, well, we actually just signed with Road Racer. And so basically the Under One Flag said, oh, cool. Well, thanks a lot. Well, we're not paying for any more of your tour.
Ooh, I wonder if they had like right of first refusal or something.
So there was something bad with the contract, and they basically got kicked off the tour. And so just as they maybe had an opportunity to get probably bigger, playing to European audiences with Nuclear Assault and Exodus, like it was all sort of killed. And Mike basically says that's the major cause for them breaking up at that point, because like the business end of it like killed them to the point where they were just like, this is not fun anymore. This is not worth it. Like all the momentum we've just created just got fucking murdered.
That's why everybody needs a Rod Smallwood, so you can just focus on the music and not have to worry about any of the other BS.
Exactly. Yeah. Really frustrating. So, yeah, because I always wondered, like, why, all of a sudden, I mean, because Mind Wars is so strong, I just kind of was like, what just happened? They just, like, disappeared. They played some live shows, and then they were just gone. And that's it. So we get these kind of 2 full-length records. There's a lot of live stuff that's kind of floating around, especially on that Total Terror box set thing. It's got like the El Revenjo, which I believe was somewhat of an officially released live record. I don't have the original, but yeah, it's basically a live recording, I think from the Mind Wars tour. And then, Disc 4 has, some more live footage, and then, like I said, a DVD. So they've got it's been fairly curated, which is cool, Mm-hmm. What do you think of the artwork? Kind of interesting. Kind of curious.
Well, I think the most interesting thing is the logo. I think the logo is fantastic.
Yeah,
it has like a weird, like early Games Workshop look or something to it. It seems way more thought out than most logos back then.
Yeah, basically, like the concept came from like Kurt of like doing the artwork, and then basically Rick Arlucci, and then Mark Mahoney is the guy that did the Bones logo. And I thought it kind of catches my eye a little bit, and I was kind of curious, you as an artist, like what your thoughts are on it. But I just like, There's
And
so
for the
much.
time too, like those covers are all kind of bleak looking. There's like they're all muted. There's no like primary colors like a lot of thrash would have had at the time. Even like the Agent Steel cover, it's just like what is it, like a sky
Yeah, it's like
and a big
blue.
like
Yeah.
metal logo on there.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, so I just thought that
It looks
logo,
serious and important.
yeah, and they do kind of have an apocalyptic sort of quality to, there's like a more serious quality to their music in a way, and even their lyrics, especially on Mind Wars, which just goes after organized religion a whole bunch. And
I think your comparison of Voivod early on, I can kind of see that with the art too. The same
Yeah.
like thematic kind of stuff as Voivod, just like rendered in a different way.
sure, and that was Away, right, that did all that, the
Yep.
artwork.
Yeah, he's done every cover as far as I know.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty wild. So then we get to Terror and Submission, all right? And that's kind of where things kind of start. And like as I mentioned before, Kurt wrote all except for a song called Tomorrow's End, which we're not playing. And so you can hear a lot of the Nawabum stamp that's kind of all over these songs, plus a lot of like he was also into like Deep Purple and Sabbath and Zeppelin and things like that. The production was not great. Like I said, the guy they got didn't really understand metal and sort of made a lot of it too soft and too mellow and a bit,
Yeah, the edges are kind of rounded over a little bit.
Yep. And so luckily that gets improved when we get to Mind Wars and stuff like that. But, let's talk for a moment, I guess, like about like Keith's vocal style, because his main influences that he came in with basically was, he said he was a big like Bon Scott and like Roger Daltrey fan. And he liked Halford a little bit, but like he wasn't like a big metal dude. He was more, like I said, like a hard rock kind of guy. Who does he remind you of anyone? Because I have some thoughts that I wrote down, but I'm just kind of curious if like
I wrote that about 6 times on my notes, because he sounds like there's like when he has a little bit of a gruffness, he's got a little bit of Hetfield. Sometimes when he does like one of these weird like soaring wails, he has like a Dave Mustaine kind of vibe. There's some Tom Araya. There's all kinds of stuff, but
like the nasal thing that Mustaine does sometimes.
Yeah, but I feel like there's something older, like more of like a classic rock thing that I'm just completely not thinking of.
I think it's a lot of Daltrey, and I know I don't know how much you're a Who fan, but I've kind of gotten
fairly aware.
Years. Yeah, and so Daltrey just was different than a lot of the other British vocalists at that time. The British.
His delivery too, yeah.
And so it's a little bit of that. And then it's also weird how like he'll go like, for a guy that didn't listen to like a lot of metal when he joined the band, by the time you get to some of the stuff he does on Mind Wars, he'll do like these Max Cavalera, like guttural type moments on it. And I find those to be like fascinating, where he does this like, like kind of things. And it's
that
weird.
And those wails. Or not wails, but just rants where he just goes on and on and on. Like almost, it's not rap. It's like he's like dictating something.
It reminds me of like a faster version of like Araya or something like that. When Araya would do that, like in Jesus Saves, where he's almost like going so fucking fast, but
do it for 30 seconds.
Yeah, but it's way more rhythmic. I agree. It's I think there's a British quality to these guys too, like a British thrash. There's like a Sabbath type quality where the first couple times you listen to those Sabbath records, they're kind of impenetrable because of how like the lyric runs and all that stuff that like Dark Tranquility, stole a lot from. Yeah. But I there's like some parts of that I can kind of hear in this, and I think that was Martin, right? That was singing for Sabbath, Valkyrie. Right. Yeah. And so, I mean, I'm not as familiar with his stuff, like with Skyclad. I don't know if that was something he did like beyond Sabbath or whatever, if that was like a signature move of his, but
I haven't listened to it in so long. I couldn't tell you.
Yeah, exactly. I just know the Sabbath records. I knew you and Chris knew a little bit more about Skyclad than I did, but yeah, so he's a very, very kind of interesting dude, is all I can say. So, and I'm kind of curious how listeners kind of grab this, and this might be like, if you're not familiar with Holy Terror, parts of this episode, I think you'll like them. I don't think anybody that like hears them is like, man, these guys suck, like they don't know what they're doing. But this is like a band that you might walk away from this episode kind of scratching your head going like, I like it, but I don't know what I liked about it, or, so, I'll do my best. And I know Mark said he struggled with it, but I wrote a lot of notes for things to like kind of point out in songs and different things to like sort of look for. But this is a band you might just need to go and spend some time with afterwards. And I can tell you that, whether it hit Mark yet or not, I'm not sure. I'll maybe ask you at the end of the episode, but I know it was something I tried to like really unpack this band for a while, even before the fever dream 2 weeks ago that I talked about, where just basically like 6 hours, I just sat like writing notes or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's been a band I've been kind of trying to digest for a few years because I know I need to, because people like Wagner and other people like rank them very highly. I think in that Thrash issue of Decibel, I think they were like number 5 or number 6. Great. So there are people who really rate these guys high, and I get it, like especially Mind Wars, because I think I unpacked like the genius of Mind Wars, but it took me so long, and I just don't want listeners. It's not as immediate as some of the other thrash bands we've been covering.
No, I mean, even I think Dark Angel's more immediate. This took me some time listening and some time just thinking without listening to it, and like what came back to me and like what I remembered. So then I would go back and listen again, looking for that stuff, and then my brain kind of figured that out, and then I would absorb the next round, and I had to do it in kind of like waves.
Yep. No, I get it, because like I said, I created basically this thrash playlist for Mark and I when we started this journey, 7-8 weeks ago, whatever. And, I would kind of like listen intermittently to Holy Terror, knowing like, okay, at a certain point I need to digest this. And so I'd put it on and, be grading papers to it. And it was like, there was like lost time, like I knew I was listening to Holy Terror, but unless you actually like stop and like make yourself pay attention, you miss a lot. That was what I kind of noticed about them. They're not an incidental, they're not a casual band. Like I can just have Slayer and Metallica playing in the background and it like makes me happy. It's like, you miss it all, and I feel like that's true of a lot of like technical progressive kind of bands, right?
Except for Dream Theater, but yes.
Yeah.
This isn't like wanking, like, it's
No. I think it's progressive in the way that like you said, we talked about before, Voivod is, Voivod doesn't like do a lot of wankery, but the decisions that they make are kind of weird, Or
even kind of like how not later on, but like say like Testimony of the Agents, Pestilence, like that kind of progressive.
Yeah, no, I get that. I may have even written down Pestilence, in a couple spots. There's also like weird, especially on Terror and Submission, they're still like have a foot in like power metal stuff and Iron Maiden a little bit.
Oh, definitely.
And you hear it like on Mortal Fear, which we're going to play in this first kind of big set of music here, that it reminded me a lot of old 80s Angel Dust, which I know we played some Angel Dust on that power metal episode, more of their newer stuff. But like that old Angel Dust stuff is like those old Jag Panzer records where they're just like fierce and you're like, whoa,
Yeah.
I mean, there's even like a lot of like on Distant Calling, I hear a lot of Eric Adams early Manowar type vocals
okay, that makes sense. Yeah,
on like some of this stuff too, and it's like not just that, but like even some like Manila Road and some Sirathon Ghul in terms of like the composition, not the vocal style, but in the compositional like approach to songs. Sometimes
I actually wrote that down for one of the later segments.
Oh, did you? Cool. Yeah, that's good. I'm glad you kind of picked up on that. But yeah, there's a lot of like those early Manowar record kind of power metal qualities, and even to like some of the stuff that Dean is doing with his vocals and stuff. Because they're, and I know Wagner talked about that when he joined us for our 200th episode. He talked about Battle Hymns, which was a 1982 release, and just kind of some of the weird qualities that, Manowar has like doomy qualities and obviously power metalish qualities, but there's also some speed metal kind of mixed in there, especially in their early records. And so I think, this is another one of those bands that's drawn from like a lot of weird pools and stuff. So
yeah, the Distant Calling almost have like, it starts out like an old Venom song and then breaks into power metal.
Yeah, yeah, it's like, and Venom power metal is kind of like what Manowar and Sirath Ungul, and those bands were kind of doing, right? It was like
With a bunch of like echo and delay on everything.
Power metal, yeah. And so yeah, kind of interesting. So we're gonna march through a little set here on Terror and Submission, their first record from 1987. And the song we're going to open with is Black Plague, and that's the song that opens the whole record up. And it's kind of got that perfect kind of, album opening quality to it. A lot of like Slayer and Dark Angel. Yeah, lots of that kind of savagery. A lot of Show No Mercy style. Even Dean's vocal style. He slurs his words the same way that Araya slurred his words in like early Slayer records. Like there's a part he does in Black Plague where he slurs like "Holy are the wicked into the white," and like he does this "Holy are the wicked," and all I can say is if you're a fan of Slayer, you'll pick up on it. It's the same kind of weird thing that like Araya does when he's going really fast.
Yeah. He's adapting the written vocal to a actual spoken vocal.
Yes. And you even get like kind of an Araya, like early Araya blood shattering kind of scream. But, and this is the weird part about this production, I'm kind of curious if you even picked up on it, because the screams are fucking buried. They're not like overtly there. There's one that's just past the 3-minute mark on Black Plague. And like, I almost didn't pick up on it the first couple times. He's like doing this like long drawn out scream, but it's buried in the mix. And I'm just like, what a weird fucking choice. It's just, it's really
I didn't really pick those up on those.
Yeah. I heard them all over the place. I'll point them out when I can. And like, those are the kind of like little nuggets that when I found them, I'm like, oh, that's cool. That's like a added layer. Like he just does this like, and it's like, it's not loud, but it's like there, but the guitars and everything are going on top. And you're like, weird. Like, and you wonder if it's an accident because the guy that was producing this record didn't know what he was doing, or if it was like a conscious decision on the
like a textural thing put in afterwards or something.
Yeah. It's just very, you get twin leads, in this and stuff, but
I'm like maybe 4-5 listens into the entire discography.
Yeah.
So
you're where I was a few weeks ago. I get it. So, but yeah, this is the kind of intricate things that I think are worth listening to. Then we move on to Mortal Fear, which we were kind of talking about before. And Mortal Fear, I think it's interesting. I was going to share just a little bit of like their kind of lyrical approach, because I thought this is just different than lyrics we've heard in a lot of thrash bands. But Mortal Fear has the lyrics that goes, "A seeker of the fortune, heir to the throne, from the horn of plenty, I taste life alone. Memories soon disappear, through the haze becomes the twilight, as omen for the future, the destination lies in sight. Even gods in their infinity, the immortals fall away, sanctuaries, uncertainty, masterpieces turn to gray. In twilight I witness higher fall, leaving from where they once belonged. Sands of time forgotten so quick, ages pass as none regret. On their knees I see supreme, fade into their mortal place, the ending of some passing dream, genocide of higher race." Like, those are not normal lyrics that you were getting from like thrash bands in 87. You know what I mean? Like, I still don't know what that song's about. You know what I mean? Like, it's cool and it's esoteric and it's got some kind of poetry to it. And I think there's like a lot of extra thought and care that's put into this band. And I kind of am starting to understand why people like a Wagner really like pronounce these guys genius, because it's like one of those, the deeper you go, it's a deep well, and like it depends on how much time you want to sort of spend with it, but man, there's like multitudes to be given here. And speaking of that, Wagner, today when we're recording this is the anniversary of Chuck from Death's passing away, and also we lost
19 years ago.
Yeah, 19 years ago. We also lost Sean Malone a couple days ago from Cynic, and
Cynic's not doing good, man.
No, 2 Seans in 1 year, man. It's kind of grim.
Both are like 50, 51 years old.
I know, very sad. But yeah, I woke up, was eating breakfast this morning. I decided to watch the Death documentary, and the whole time they're interviewing Wagner in it, he's wearing his Holy Terror shirt, and I was like, that's apropos. We're recording Holy Terror today, so. Yeah. But again, I think it's those little things that, like the lyrics, they reward people who are going to give them repeat listens, I guess is what I'm saying in a long-winded way.
Yeah, it's definitely not. I don't think that's probably why they're not as popular as Slayer. Slayer's pretty immediate. The music is immediate. You can hear subtleties and stuff, but it's kind of what you see is what you get. This is definitely much more to scratch at, to like understand and appreciate.
Sure. And you'll get bigger kind of, there's some hooks that come later on, especially on Mind Wars. Like, I mean, his vocals really like kind of adapt and stuff. But yeah, I agree. It doesn't have the same kind of vocal hooks that you get with like your Anthraxes or Metallicas or bands like that. And
even I do think that the vocals are the most like memorable part of everything.
For sure.
Like if I remember a song, I remember the vocal line, not the guitar line.
Yep. And the guitars do like incredible things, but they're buzzsawed and they're like buried and they're
fast as fuck.
Oh my God. I mean, it's just, yeah, this is a really, that speed metal aspect to this record is there, you know? Mortal Fear for me is my favorite song from the Terror and Submission record. Again, you probably were still trying to sort all that stuff out, but that's probably the one that like, I kind of keep coming back to. Really cool bass riffing. It's kind of hidden in the weird production, but you can hear it in the midsection a little bit. Mm-hmm. Great snarl in this song from Dean during the chorus. There's another hidden scream to sort of listen for. So there you go, listeners. Listen to these kind of hidden screams. They make a couple appearances here and there.
Yeah, the bass you're talking about, that's where like about midway through where the bass starts going counter to the guitar a little bit.
Yes. Yeah. It's really cool. And like I said, I think it's a great song. You know, I mean, Terror and Submission doesn't get as much love sometime as Mind Wars does, probably because of the production, but like there are really cool things happening in these tunes for sure.
There's that little right toward the end, the harmonizing like tremolo riffs that go back and forth.
Yep. And that's probably the part that reminded me, I think, maybe of Angel Dust and kind of that sort of German kind of power metal that Halloween and Angel Dust and other early 80s German bands were sort of doing, for sure. And, it's interesting because Distant Calling, which is the third song we're going to play in this set, that's the one that I hear a lot of the Manowarisms and the Sirathon Ghoul and early Nuabum kind of stuff. But that was also like a thing. There's another song we could have played called Guardians of the Netherworlds. And it's like slower and much more overtly kind of power metal Manowarish. And so they definitely had like a foot in that camp, even though like when they're fast, they're fucking fast. But when they're slow, they have these like deliberately like warm kind of power metal-ish things happening on Terror and Submission. So it
makes them kind of that's why I think at first I was wondering why you curated the list like you did, because there was more variety, but that's the kind of boring stuff.
yeah I know that's like the stuff like, I mean, I like mentioning it, but like to me it's like when they get down to brass tacks and they become like the fucking messed up weird holy terror, that's when like I think they blossom almost, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's the most unique thing. Otherwise, that's like, hey, we've heard 10 other bands that do this just fine.
Exactly. And it's great. I like Guardians of the Netherworlds, but it's just like not what I want to shine the light on, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, Distant Calling, man, you get some great guitar melodies. He holds a note longer than he should at times in this song, which I really love. And he does this great thing, and it's in the last song we're going to hear, where he does this note that like he's holding the note right when the solo sort of comes in. And, Nicole did that on some Snow White type stuff. And I kind of pointed out in the last episode, but man, it's just like, it's cool. So, but yeah, so let's get into it. Let's let the listeners try to start to unpack this stuff a little bit. We got, a trio tunes here from Terror and Submission. We got Black Plague, Mortal Fear, and Distant Calling. That was Distant Calling, Mortal Fear, and Black Plague. So yeah, we got one more before we move on to the so-called, I guess, masterpiece. Depends on who you ask, but it seems that this is the record, Mind Wars, that will get a little bit more attention. But
and it sounds like a Voivod album title.
Yes, it does. For sure. Cool. I mean, I love the cover for Terror and Submission, but the cover for Mind Wars is even like cooler and grimmer, and it's just I don't know, the like crucifix that's just kind of being like suffocated, and yeah, it's cool. There's a lot to like about the aesthetic of this band, as Mark was kind of pointing out before. One song we're not playing is the only song that Mike Alvord wrote, called Tomorrow's End, from Terror and Submission, and it's not fully formed. It's not my favorite song on Terror and Submission, but if you're familiar with the record, I did want to mention it because it kind of hints at some of the outside the box ideas that the band's going to start to really embrace on Mind Wars, but it's almost like not, I want to say half baked, because it's not like a bad song, but it's not like fully developed. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so it's like, one of the things that's interesting about Mind Wars is it's more of a collaborative writing effort. Kurt's still the main guy, but he wrote almost everything on Terror and Submission, whereas I think Mike wrote like 3 songs on Mind Wars, and other people started to have like more input. And that's why I think Mind Wars, just like the puzzle pieces fit more for me, because there's like a little bit more weirdness that everybody's allowed to bring in, you know, and very cool. And so we're going to end with a tune from Terror and Submission, called Alpha Omega, the Bringer of Balance. I mean, that's not a normal thrash song title in this.
Sounds like a later on Death song.
Yeah, or something from Voivod, honestly.
Yeah,
like something like weird like that, And this song ends the record, and in a lot of ways, to me, this kind of like gives you a preview of a more kind of progressive tendencies that you're going to hear on Mind Wars. And again, as Mark pointed out, we use the word progressive as a pejorative statement the way Wagner uses it in Mean Deviation. And what do I mean by that, Mark, for people that maybe haven't, read that book? Like, the word progressive means different things to different people, but I kind of like the way that Wagner sort of explains like what progressive is.
I'm sorry, I was just reading another paragraph here. How Wagner...
Yeah, just the idea that like a band like Dream Theater isn't necessarily progressive, because they kind of keep doing a lot of the same things. Like, they may have been progressive for their first couple records, and then after that, it's just kind of samey. And like, to me, like when I say progressive in regard to this, I don't want people to think that it's
a progressive as like never doing the same thing twice, having a progressive mindset, not necessarily playing 15 arpeggios in the song.
Yeah, and I think it's a mentality of like, we so often talk about bands that we like that play at the edge of their abilities, and I don't know what the abilities of these guys are. I think they're all fucking talented dudes, who have
for sure
records. But again, I feel like they are playing at an edge. There's definitely an edge to a lot of things that they're doing here. And,
well, I think if you listen to the Agent Steel record, and then imagine that played twice as fast.
Yeah,
with more intricate interludes and songwriting and crazier vocals, like I think they're really good songwriters, but they're pushing themselves speed wise. Like that's almost the edict.
Yep. Yeah, there's like something kind of like spasmodic about like when the solos come in. They come in the same way that like Slayer solos kind of just like bubble to the surface, but Slayer solos have like a more memorable quality to them sometimes. Mm-hmm. These are just like, they're dazzling and they knock you out, but they're like surrounded by all these other elements that are also doing things that you almost can't concentrate on just the solo the way you can with like Slayer or something like that.
Yeah, because there's still like the guitar back and forth is almost like two not dueling fiddles, but that type of like really furious violin playing like you'd have in like symphonies or whatever that would go back and forth building up tension. Yep. They're playing the guitar so fast it almost has that kind of feel.
Well, and one thing I think listeners will hear in this Alpha Omega song is I wrote that the rhythm section especially starts to really create what I call like the blurred rumble that you hear a lot in like Voivod, where it's like, it's not, I don't know, like Manowar did it a little bit. And even Wagner was like, yeah, with the bass especially, you know, like there's something that Voivod does with like the drums and the bass that is not like, it's not like they're doing like a bunch of jazzy stuff to be progressive, but like the things that they did with their rhythm section are really like off kilter and weird and create this sort of like different quality. And I think Holy Terror tap into that a little bit too, you know?
Yeah, I would agree with that.
And you can really hear it in here. And I think that's maybe where like people ascribe of like that this song is like the preview of like the complicated stuff that they're going to do on Mind Wars a little bit. And it's a perfect way to end the record, because it's almost like, here's where the future's going, you know, like we're going to be kitchen sinking some shit down the road a little bit. I mean, these even like near the end, like a sweet kind of like stop start section that sort of builds to like this really, I wrote this desperate emotive intensity that like is just this like great strong finish to the song, you know? So like that stop start kind of thing that, you know, progressive or tech metal bands are kind of known for, it's in here, but it's not the defining feature of the song either, right? It's just like a little like puzzle piece that they sort of put together. And Dean is really locked in here. I think this is, for me, maybe his best vocal performance on Terror and Submission. And you really hear like there's a moment at like the 124 mark that he just like goes into this awesome scream that then just goes straight from there into like awesome, I wrote spasmodic, dazzling solos. And it's just like one after another. So I don't know.
It was like Halloween was having a fucking battle of the guitarists or something.
Yeah. It's got that. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I mean, and early Halloweens are kind of like off the rails a little bit, you know, even some of the early, there's moments in like Blind Guardian where they almost feel like they're going off the rails. Right. You know? And that's what's like appealing to about those kind of songs, you know, and there's bands in that era. So, so I think it's a cool way to end Terror and Submission and kind of a nice transition towards Mind Wars. And so let me introduce Mind Wars a little bit, and then we'll kind of play the music. Then we'll come back and talk about the Mind Wars songs that we sort of heard here. But Mind Wars is recorded a year later in '88. Like I said, it's a lot more collaborative songwriting process that's going on. Mind Wars got them a lot of buzz, especially in Europe. I think Kerrang gave them like, you know, like a score that was higher than a lot of other like mainstream thrash bands that were kind of being released in that year. But unfortunately, like I said, they were kind of self-destructing as a band a little bit. You know, there was even like a part where like during the first or second leg of the US tour, they kicked Kurt out of the band because of drugs. And he's the Steve Harris. Imagine like Maiden kicking like Steve Harris off a part of like the Live After Death tour or something like that. Like what the fuck? So like it's not just that record label stuff I talked about. There's other elements that are happening, but like I think that record label thing was like, that was like sealed the deal. Like this is something's kind of wrong.
This is kind of a band too that I couldn't imagine them going too much further. It's kind of nice that this is just like a snapshot of time.
Absolutely. And you just kind of know, like, you don't know what they could have done next. And I'm kind of curious to pick Wagner's brain on that. Like, what do you think a third record from these guys would be? And he probably doesn't have an answer either. He's probably like, I don't even know. Maybe that's the what's so perfect about these guys, you know?
Well, if it came out in 90, like, what a weird year that was.
Yeah. I mean,
like, you had grunge, you had hair metal, you had death metal. Like, I mean, Pantera, like, it was crazy.
It maybe fit like with like Death Human or something like that. You know what I mean? Like maybe that kind of stuff, but that's even.
But at the time, I wouldn't have given it the time of day because of the vocals.
Sure.
You know, they weren't screaming or they weren't doing death metal grunts.
Yeah. No, they're. Although,
like kind of, you know, of like a forgotten bygone era, really, at that point.
Sure. I see them kind of like especially we're going to hear in Judas Reward, which is the song we'll hear after Alpha Omega. Like, to me, that song like announces that this is like a different band than what you had heard previously. You There's this updated sort of growth. It's more epic. And Dean's vocals on this song really show you like, okay, I'm fucking at the top of my powers. You know, he's like in full control. And this is where he'll show off his highs and his lows. This is like, if you listen, he does like that Max Cavalera, like kind of guttural thing that you hear on like Beneath the Remains and some of that kind of like era and stuff like that. So it's like this weird, I wrote the Judas Reward has a strange evocation of like a weird German British thrash through the American lens. So it's like they don't sound like an American thrash band, but they have some of those like aggressive German qualities to them, and then the like weird labyrinthian things that you heard from like some of those weird British thrash bands like Acid Rain or Sabbath or whatever. So I don't know, there's a weird band. And so Judas Reward, I think you can kind of like get a sense that, okay, this is going to be, we've upped the ante from Terror and Submission, but I think Mike Dean is like, or not Mike Dean, Keith Dean the guy. Mike Dean's from COC.
Yeah. Well, he does another one of those great rants in this song too.
Oh yeah, and that's like the rant is like when he does like the guttural thing. He's just like it's like he's almost like barking, but it's like it's still clear, but it has like this quality to him that, again, the only thing I can think of is it just really reminds me of like things that like I heard Max do in Sepultura, and that's just kind of where my mind went sort of with it. But so let's get into it. We got Alpha Omega, the bringer of balance, that closes out Terror and Submission. Then we've got Judas Reward that kicks off Mind Wars, and then we'll close out with the Immortal Wasteland, which we can talk about when we get back.
Lucas
That's the Immortal Wasteland, Judas Reward, and Alpha Omega, the Bringer of Balance.
Just one real quickly. I think the Judas Reward sounds like a fan fiction version of the original Star Trek episode.
Yeah, there's a Judas Reward. There's a song. All right, this is kind of a weird thing, but so anyways, Fozzy, which is not a band I'm really into, but
Chris Jericho,
yeah, he has been part of a new rival company to WWE called AEW, and they're doing quite well. They've actually had a pretty good kind of run. Sting came back and joined with them.
I've even heard stuff about him, and I'm not really follower of the wrestling thing, so it must be doing well.
Yeah, it's getting some kind of like mainstream attention, but he comes to the ring to a song called like Judas Factor, I think, like that. And it's the only Fozzy song I like. And when there were crowds, it was awesome because the entire stadium would sing the like chorus as like he would like enter. And it's cool. It's like, you know, I get like, I'm not a Fozzy guy. I mean, if they were like playing at like a festival, like I might see him just for the novelty of like watching Chris Jericho singing metal songs.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what I think of when I hear Judas Reward. I think of that fucking song.
Or Maiden's Judas My Guide. You familiar with that song?
No, I'm not. What
what is that on? Is it like No Prayer for the Dying or something?
Yeah, you said you've been kind of like revisiting that record.
That's a record mostly because I've heard the other one so many times.
Oh yeah,
that's this. I was like, oh, you know, there's actually some great stuff in here.
Yeah, that's where I'm at. Like, I feel like I do that with like film now, where I'm like trying to like fill in and watch like the really really early like Scorsese and stuff that I'm like, you know.
It's from Fear of the Dark.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah.
You know, and that's a record. Honestly, I don't know that well either, outside like a few songs. Now, did you buy those when they came out? Were you buying Fear of the Dark in '90 when it came out?
No.
Okay. All right.
No, I had like the live record, and that's what actually got me back into them was like a real live one and a real dead one, which a lot of people think are some of their worst live records they've ever did. But it just kind of like reintroduced me to them again with Bruce doing some of the old songs, and
it's sort of like greatest hits records too, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like Decade of Aggression, I prefer Live Undead, but Decade of Aggression, when I got that on cassette tape, that was the only way I heard the Metal Blade Slayer songs, because it was like I didn't know how to find those Metal Blade Slayer songs because, you know, you remember what Slayer and like. So like when I first got into Slayer, it was like 7th grade maybe, and I was getting it through Columbia House. I mean, let's be honest, that's how people our age did it, and they didn't have the Metal Blade shit. So like we would like put on Hell Awaits, and we're like, whoa, what is this fucking song? You know, we had never heard like a 7-minute long Slayer song because it just wasn't what they did. You know, Season of the Abyss and a few others, but this was like different. And so yeah, I think sometimes live records, even if they're like not the best live records, are a great way to like gateway you into bands sometimes, you know?
Yeah, because I think at that point I'd kind of given up on, or not even, Maiden really wasn't on my radar much because I was more interested in death metal. But the first one I bought when it came out was X Factor.
Oh, man.
All the other ones I'd gotten kind of, you know, between, 90 and 93 or something.
Sure. I mean, hey, go ahead. Yeah.
I was saying, like, Maiden's one of those bands that transcended a couple generations, too. So, like, friends, older brothers would have Maiden. I was like, man, those covers are cool, and I really dig some of this music, but they weren't, like, a contemporary band for me.
No, I agree. Yeah, Piece of Time, or Piece of Mind was the first one I got on cassette tape used, and then, but it's funny you say, like, X Factor was your first one. That's, like, for me, you know, Sound of White Noise was the first Anthrax I ever had.
Yeah, you'd heard Anthrax before that, right?
I mean, I kind of did, but like not on the radio or, you know what I mean? Like, I mean, I think right after around that same time we got the Attack of the Killer Bees from Columbia House. And like, we thought like, you know, starting up a posse was hilarious. And like, you know, they just seemed like this, like, who the fuck are these guys? You know, I think then like we heard, you know, Bring the Noise and a few other things. And we just were like, it wasn't until after that I got like Among the Living, and I was like, oh, okay, this is like a band that was kind of seriously respected in thrash circles. And then I heard like Persistence of Time, and it was like, oh, okay, cool, you know.
Yeah, because I remember getting like I'd heard Maiden before I picked up X Factor, but I think what rekindled it was there's what's the name of that record label? The Swedish label that put out the Maiden and the Metallica tribute albums.
Toy Factory. No. Black Mark.
Wasn't it? Was Black something else.
Black something. Yeah, it was the label that Sacrilege were on, right?
Black Sun. Black Sun Records.
Yeah,
they did that Maiden comp, and I was like, for some reason, I didn't think that people that did death metal listened to anything else when I was younger. It was like, this is like a singular thing. Obviously, they don't care about Maiden. And I was like some of that stuff started to make sense, but
yeah, that's funny. But I mean, yeah, it's hard because unless you have a well-tuned ear, you can't find the Maiden in like early death records, you know. Yeah. But like Chuck was a fan of all that stuff, but it was just like buried, you know, in some of that. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. So yeah, anyways, those are weird gateways into but yeah, Judas Reward, that's what got us talking about that. And so Immortal Wasteland, speaking of Iron Maiden, that's the one for me where I hear a lot of the anthemic kind of Iron Maiden kind of gallop stuff on that song. Really aching melodies, killer vocals, a battle-ready chorus. I mean, it's like that's, you know, really, really incredible anthemic kind of stuff happening on Immortal Wasteland. That was a song I kept like restarting over because I was like, holy shit, like I'm feeling this song.
That's when I got I put Maiden and Manila Road on that one.
Yep. Yeah, I can definitely get that. The bass playing on this song, he really gets to shine. And I think this is where you can kind of tell. If you couldn't tell in Judas Reward, you can definitely tell in Immortal Wasteland that they have a producer who knew metal.
Yeah.
Like who can like compartmentalize their sounds and really sort of like put things together for them. And I just think it's apparent on a song like this, you know. So, but yeah, Manila Road is another band like that I think is hard to categorize because they, you know, they had a foot in traditional metal, but they had a foot in power metal, but they also were like not either of those things. Like they were kind of their own genre of
they're just
metal.
Heavy metal.
Yeah, exactly. They're just kind of that. And I think like Holy Terror didn't necessarily subscribe to like traditional like kind of thrash aesthetics. Like they have thrash elements when they want thrash elements, but sometimes they don't want thrash elements and they want like Maiden elements or they want this, you know. And I think that's kind of one of the qualities about this band that makes them kind of perplexing in a sort of way. And speaking of that, I have this Vice article that came out a few years ago, and it's pretty cool that Vice wrote an article about these guys, and it came from who wrote it? Alex Deller. I don't know much about the guy, but it's from their Noisy division, which I think did like, you know, this is like their pop culture division, and it's the title of the article is called "Holy Terror Ruled, Burned Out, and Remained Criminally Underrated," and I think it came out when the Total Terror box set sort of emerged. And there's a part in it where they talk a little bit about how weird the band sort of was. Yeah, it says that there were guys in the band that were just as into like Mahavishnu Orchestra as they were Motorhead, as they were Nawabum, Led Zeppelin. And it says so it perhaps is understandable that they felt little in common with the wider thrash metal scene, despite gigs with Exodus, Creator, and Megadeth. Then there's this quote from Mike Alvord where he says, Kurt and Dave Mustaine almost got into a fist fight because Dave was hitting on Kurt's girlfriend. Recalls Alvord of this later experience. He says, it was pretty ugly, but beyond that, we didn't really see much of those guys. So it sounds like they're kind of like alone. It says the band seemed well aware of this separation, but nonetheless unwilling to toe the line. Alvord said, I don't think we realized or recognized the movement. We were more focused on putting out our music. When Kurt and I would discuss things, we'd say, let's take Iron Maiden and put it on 78. And that's
my favorite explanation of their sound.
Yeah. I mean, that's I mean, yeah.
If you could do it in one sentence, that's it.
That's it. Yep. So he captured it. And he says, and I think if you ask Kurt, he'd say the band's sound stemmed from anger. Those guys were just pissed. They felt that they were always getting the short end of the stick. And I think a lot of that aggression came out in the music. And so, yeah, it's like incredibly fast, incredibly angry. And even like you talked about earlier, the cover, the lyrics, like everything's just viscerally angry. They're really lashing out on mind wars against like organized religion. We'll hear in this next set of music that they basically they create like a little trilogy that was like an attack on organized religion. And the songs all sort of bleed into themselves. I think it's sorry.
Was it Do Unto Others, No Resurrection, and Christian Resistance?
It's actually Terminal Humor, Mind Wars, and A Fool's Gold. And basically they represent three different like views on like kind of Christianity. That's kind of interesting. Yeah, and it's like a trilogy that's kind of like focused on that and stuff. But he kind of goes on and says, in a way, it's ironic that Holy Terror were outsiders in what was at the time very much a tribe of outsiders. But Alvard says, the guys from Exodus and Nuclear Assault, they treated us well. And when we were on tour at DRI, those guys were great. But then I remember pulling into a gas station during a U.S. tour, and I can't remember what the band was. He says Jet Boy, or maybe some band related to Warrant. He says, but they thumbed their nose at us. They had this gigantic tour bus while we were a little 25-foot motorhome that had 7 guys sleeping in it. We were all tattered and hadn't showered in days, and they just looked at us like we were lower than everything. It's like everything. You want to be in the big boys club, but there's only room for so many. So you just try and suck it up and do what it takes to get there, or do what we did and just say, screw it. If we make it, we make it, and if we don't, we don't. And I think that's kind of a explanation for, in a lot of ways, for why they just kind of did it their own weird way and weren't trying to be part of, not that a lot of these bands were trendy or whatever, but they definitely like avoided a lot of the traditional like rules of thrash, even though they're kind of categorized as a thrash band. I don't know.
I think they're thrown in there because they came out at that era and nobody has any better ideas.
Yeah, because I honestly think they transcend that, but I don't know what I would call them. It's just they're something, they're metal.
They're metal, yeah.
They're a fast metal band that's doing, very interesting music, lyrically, vocally.
If somebody asked them, they would say, we're Holy Terror.
Yeah, we sound like Holy Terror. That's the thing. Like, I can't think of anybody else that really sounds like Holy Terror. They're just kind of...
No, I think the closest thing is like they could be in a small subgenre with Dark Angel.
Yeah, caffeine.
Right. Yeah, caffeine metal, whatever weird speed-related thing can come up with.
Sure. So we're going to get into in this next set. We've got a trio of tunes that we're going to hear. Terminal Humor bleeds into Mind War, and I didn't play the full trilogy because I think the Fool's Gold's cool, but it's like there's only so much music we could play. But they kind of pick up half, in the beginning of Terminal Humor, and you get this really like awesome sort of like bass kind of part that's kind of going on here. And then when Mind Wars opens, holy shit. All right. I don't know if you picked up on this, but this is like the common thing that people talk about this song. But the incredible riff that comes in about 20 seconds into Mind War, it's basically Hangar 18.
Yeah, I my notes for this is bass, Megadeth.
Yeah, totally there. And again, this is 2 years before Rust in Peace. So, again, no one's saying that Megadeth took this from Holy Terror, but it's just interesting because they were
skirting around the same kind of like musical ideas, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, think about like that record in general. I mean, Rust in Peace is like pushing that aspect of thrash to almost the furthest it can go, right?
It's a ferocious record, just like these are.
Yep, exactly. And so I think that there's some of that, but man, that killer part where you first hear that riff, like it grabs you and then you're like, why do I love this? You're like, oh yeah, because I love Hangar 18. And so like you're feeling some of those same kind of thoughts and stuff like that. But I mean, basically these, lyrically, it's a critique on Christian morality and Christian upbringing. And so it's like unpacking some of those kind of things as well. And then when you're about 3 minutes into Mind Wars, they wrote the part at 3 minutes where it seamlessly moves from pounding beatdown, all right, to catchy triplets before a Mustaine-esque solo sneaks in, I said is absolutely magical. And so there's just like these transitional sort of movements that they do that are just, I don't know. It's hard for me to explain. The listener will just have to like kind of go on that ride here. And so you got about a minute that's terminal humor. That's kind of the intro. That's like got the cool bass playing and stuff. And then right when Mind Wars, the song kicks in, that's when you'll hear about 20 seconds in the Hangar 18 riff. And then just kind of look for in that sort of second half of the song where, like I said, you get this like weird kind of like breakdown, beat down sort of part. And then these really cool, like triplet kind of catchy moments. And then this just awesome solo. It's some mind blowing shit. And then we've got from there, hang on, I'm gonna pull up my list, Damned by Judges. And that's a song I snuck in on Mark. I just put it in today. So he probably doesn't have any notes. And I didn't really write too many notes for this. But the reason I threw this in is because ultimately, as like I was kind of reflecting on this, is this episode is really about a lot of unique things, and in particular Keith Dean, rest in peace. He's kind of this mystical kind of quality of vocals that he brings, and I think pound for pound his chorus in Damned by Judges is amongst the catchiest things he does in this whole band. And you sort of said that those are the kind of things that you kind of grabbed onto and like that really like hooked into you and like kept you coming back over and over again with some of those like crazy like staccato vocal parts that he does that are catchy, and these runs of language that he's always doing.
Yeah, it plays so contrary to what I think almost anybody else would have done for a vocal line over the top of that.
Yeah. Yep.
It's just super. That's like the spending 6 hours or something maybe with this band. That's like the one initial kind of takeaway. But I think with repeated listening, that's just kind of like the easy part. Or the immediate part.
Yep. Yeah. Once you get the vocals down, then you can start to like dissect the compositional sort of strategies that they're doing. And there's another like killer, like catchy riff in Damned by Judges. It has like a little intro with some kind of samples and kind of spoken word kind of stuff going on. And then when the song finally kicks in, you kind of have that like anthemic, like, oh shit, like I'm feeling this. And so I think the one issue is for some people, and I think a lot of like really progressive minded bands do this sometimes, is I think sometimes they don't stay on an idea for very long. And, for people that want the warmth of like the catchiness of like Master of Puppets, where you hear the same riff, like repeat it all throughout, like that can kind of turn some people off because they'll hit on a riff and you love the riff, like the Hangar 18 riff you're going to hear. They're on it, but they're not on it for that long. And then they're on to something new. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, do you like that when bands do that? Or does that sort of drive you crazy where you're like, no, I want more, like, give me that riff over and over again. Like, I feel like I've heard other bands that do that traditionally. I'm kind of curious if there are any that come to mind for you. None that I can think of.
Jeez, right, I can't either, but I don't know. There's times for, that's why Metallica is so popular, is because they give you something that they kind of give you what you want to some degree.
Yeah,
they don't completely like blow your expectations. So I think we need, as far as like your continuing like musical journey as you keep like listening to stuff as an adult. If like these kind of bands are the ones that, like, you have to like stop a second and be like, oh, it's like we need more challenging music. Yeah. Because you don't want it to be exactly what you expect. You don't want like the vocals don't follow what I think they should, because you can kind of, after listening to so much music, you can predict, where people might go or what people might run. Like Metallica lyrics now, you can kind of guess what the next one's going to be without knowing it.
Sure. Yep. You can like
the rhyming patterns and strategies and stuff.
Yep. But I guess that's maybe a quality I could see that really affects maybe the resistance that people could have to a band like this, who want something more gratifying out of their thrash right away. They want like maybe more instant gratification. And I think that's not what this band's kind of about. They're perplexing, and then they kind of own that.
They give you what they want to give you. Mm-hmm. If you get something out of it, cool. If not, then, move along.
Yeah.
Like that seems to be there. Yeah, kind of a singular band.
They didn't really care about being popular. And it's like sometimes those bands need a few more records than just two to like dig in and create that kind of legacy, you know?
It would be interesting to see what, you know, album 3 or 4 might have done is if they would have refined everything more.
Yeah, because I mean, you have this secret weapon. You've got this, you know, Keith's vocals are never going to be bad, right?
Yeah.
And so maybe utilize him more as a weapon. But
well, and see, like even like what Voivod did in their career, from being like really techy to like kind of poppy for a little while, and then like going to death metal, but it all had their kind of, you know, through line.
yeah, you could always tell it was sort of Voivod, no matter what genre, that sandbox they were kind of playing in and stuff. You know, even on like Angel Rat versus like, you know,
Outer Limits or something too.
Like that. Yeah, Outer Limits, absolutely. Yeah. So, and again, I think that's why, like, you know, and we're going to hear Wagner talk at the end of this next set of music. You know, a guy like who's into that quality of stuff would be so attracted to a band like Holy Terror, because they are giving you multitudes and throwing curveballs at you and keeping you guessing. And there's people that like that aspect of music. They want to be surprised. They don't want predictable stuff. And I think people like you and I we can go either way. Depends on what mood we're in, you know?
Yeah.
There's times I want comfort food. And I think even like Wagner is into comfort food. I mean, that's why he likes Kiss and stuff like that. You know, I mean, he's not constantly always looking for, you know, people to challenge him, but I think certain people, or the longer, like you said, that you stick with analyzing music and thinking about music, the more you want out of your music, you know, and ultimately, like,
and the different like things you want. That's why like we've got such a variety of stuff we listen to. If you look at our collections, it's like it just looks like a music store.
Yeah, it's very, very strange. You know, I mean, I was looking at my Spotify year-end list or whatever, and like I don't know, like my Kiss was my number one thing this year because of prepping for that Kiss show. And, you know, who would have thought that? You would have thought that. And then my number 2 is Run the Jewels. You know, so like that's my life in a nutshell. You know, Kiss and Run the Jewels. Like Run the Jewels, who's singing like these really prescient, relevant songs about like the real like stuff going on in society, and then fucking Kiss. You know, Plaster Cast.
I haven't checked out what my most played thing is yet.
Yeah, I'm just always curious because I don't listen to all my music on Spotify. I only listen to certain things on it, like playlists, especially shit I listen to in my classroom, because Spotify is easy to just like put on, you know? So
if I'm not at home, that's what I listen to usually.
Exactly. But it's never going to be like obscure black metal, really, or whatever, because I'm not listening to that stuff when I'm like, you know, grading papers or in the classroom. You know what I mean? That stuff I'm going to listen to different, you know, so it's weird. It's going to be like weird pop stuff, you know, or whatever. So I don't know. Anyways, kind of interesting. And then we're going to close this set out with No Resurrection, you know, point, counterpoint. I love he does that like 3 times in the song. Point, counterpoint. And it's almost like, it's not like the second he does that, that's where like, I think if you're still along for the ride and haven't made your mind up, when he says point, counterpoint, you got to know this is not a normal fucking thrash record. Like, he's like, they're presenting complex arguments to you. They're analyzing like the ethics of like Christian morality and like how like the evolution of like Christian teaching. Like they're like breaking down a lot of weird shit. You know what I mean? Like it's not normal stuff. So here you get some more of the guttural vocals that return again, as do his soaring highs. Really cool shit. I said that this is probably the song that felt the most like a Sabbath song in terms of like weird labyrinthian composition kind of shit. There's a lot of counterpoint between the savage riffs and the like really catchy, lovely melodies in the chorus. And so like, it's almost like lyrically he's announcing point, counterpoint, but the music also does a lot of point, counterpoint. And I think it's a cool song of contradictions. And that's really what this band's kind of all about in a nutshell, you know? So
yeah, point, counterpoint, and Iron Maiden on 78.
Yes, there you go. So yeah, we got a trio from Mind Wars as we start to kind of wind things down here. We got Terminal Humor and the Mind Wars, which are kind of combined into one song. Then we got Damned by Judges, then No Resurrection, and then we're going to hear from our good friend Jeff Wagner.
except as it may affect this charge of murder. One final point. The fact that the accused is a priest, under holy orders, should not influence your verdict one way or the other. You may now withdraw to consider your verdict.
choice, agonizing fear sitting, living nothing, watching thing. I'm a man in body, no speech of bondage. Actions of a soul that's unforeseen. No resurrection, unless you want it to go on. No right or wrong, no up or down. Feelings of pity of hellfire's wrath, denying the reckless ambition of the life. The trial of living that only goes to concede. Then what is on in control of its destinies? On no such thing beyond anyone, always on the waits for the twilight soul. Self-righteous fool down in clay bars. The contradiction to all the Jews, and the transient man who have all been condemned. But a hard brother's blind turning back. It's all we got to seize. What kind of love makes it known? Nobody's telling, nobody's telling. Somebody's telling bad answers. Who's right, qualified? Who's regulation, soul's inquisition? Must I, should I give my life? Standing sending away in the doorway, patiently watching the gateway tonight. No resurrection, unless you walk into the sun. No right or wrong, no up or down. Feelings of pity out and fire's wrath, denying the reckless ambition of the life.
Hey, Jason and Mark, you are asking for words on Holy Terror, and I tried to write something to use as a guide, and I just failed. This band is one that's very difficult for me to talk about, apparently, whereas I can talk about other bands ad nauseum. I don't know, Holy Terror's got a very, very special place in my heart. I've listened to those two albums so much. I can air guitar, I can air drum, I can air bass, I can sing every single bit of those. And I certainly do it with a kind of abandon, whether I'm listening with a friend or usually by myself, that I think if someone were being an onlooker to that, they might be really afraid. They make me spasm. I can't sit still and listen to them. So yeah, the air stuff is very important. They just take me to kind of this other dimension. The albums are so fresh. They sound like I'm just discovering them for the fourth or fifth time. You know, as much as I love like Ride the Lightning, Master of Puppets, Rain and Blood, Darkness Descends, and even the more obscure stuff, Holy Terror is better than all of that in a lot of ways. They have everything. The writing is really thoughtful and detailed. I think this is why I hear new things with every listen. And again, I can't imagine how many hundreds of times I've listened to these. The rhythm section is really dialed in. I mean, just as much as any great jazz or prog rhythm section, yet they're playing at speeds that I don't think most virtuosos could handle. And the guitarists, Kurt Kilfelt and Mike Alvord, their leads sound like these screaming meteors arriving to Earth. All the fire and violence you might expect with that imagery. The rhythms and the riffs they're playing are inventive. They complement each other. It's all careening at a pretty fast pace. And when it's not, they lay back and they sound like a band more rooted in traditional metal. Yet there's, of course, this quality of it that's just holy terror. As far as Keith Dean goes, the vocalist, there's nothing I can say that hasn't been said a million times. He's very, very special. He's expressive and deeply relatable, whether he's building melodies, with his melodic approach, as on Distant Calling, or when he's screeching, as on the Trails of Lifeless Carnage Left Behind line from Evil's Rising, or ranting like he does on No Resurrection and Do Unto Others. Those can't be called anything but very, very fast rants. And there's a darkness and intensity to all of that rivals something like Dark Angel, but it's more adventurous and creative. I guess if I liken them to any band, it's Dark Angel and the Darkness Descends era, but quite a bit more progressive than that. They're just metal in this perfected state. There are thrash bands and then there's Holy Terror. They transcend. They totally transcend all that. I'm super grateful that these two albums continue to awe and astonish. I'm also grateful that no reunion attempt has been made, or at least been made in a successful way. There was threats of that at one point, but they need to remain buried so that the legacy can remain alive and untarnished.
That was No Resurrection, Damned by Judges, and then we had Terminal Humor, Mind Wars that open everything up. And we got some words of wisdom from our good friend Jeff. Any thoughts on some of the things? I mean, he touched on things that we brought up, obviously, but any reaction to some of that he brought up there?
Yeah, the surpassing the genre. I think that's a pretty good statement for those guys. Like, I think anytime you're kind of part of something but can transcend it, like perhaps like, death or,
yeah,
there's certain bands that are, Dismember and both are death metal. They don't really transcend musically to anything different. But it's interesting when we've got these other bands like these guys and, Voivod, Celtic Frost, they kind of transcend the genre they're kind of come up in.
Yeah, no, and I think that's a really interesting group to sort of put them in. But I think, Death, Celtic Frost, and Voivod are kind of three bands I would kind of link to Holy Terror. Not because those bands all sound alike, but because they sort of operate beyond,
Maybe the first 4 Pyogenesis records.
Yeah, those are definitely records that kind of operate beyond, in a way too. Yeah, but it's just, it's a lot to digest, and I'm kind of curious what people's reaction to this will be. It's kind of like the first time you try to, penetrate like a bunch of like enslaved records or something. There's like just a lot going on, especially as they got more and more progressive, in that mid era, and it's almost like a blow to some people when they first try and, attack those records. And
I'd recommend, although listening these on headphones, or like, don't just listen to it on your phone, in your back pocket or something. Like a proper stereo or proper headphones does this a lot of justice.
For sure.
Even if it's listened to on Spotify.
Because that's where you start to hear that's where I start picking up on like his weird buried screams, or his like the bass lines kind of doing counter stuff to like what the guitars are doing.
The bass came through way higher on. I just got like these little powered Bluetooth speakers that I put up in my office, and that brought through the bass so much more than listen to it on headphones.
Really,
kind of like re-listen to everything just through that.
Yeah. No, that's good. Yeah, this is definitely it reveals a lot through that kind of experience. I agree. I think some of the stuff we've done has been stripped down, kind of thrash, and this is just the kind of the opposite of it. It's like layered thrash or something. It's like one thing put on top of each other, and you got to kind of like pull apart all the elements. Well,
when we first talked about doing the show, I was like, "Is this going to get samey?" And it has not at all.
And that's kind of like how I've, when we were kind of starting to put this together, that's one of the reasons why I was like, you know what, I really do want to do, Snow White, because I just think that's different, and Holy Terror, they're going to be counter to each other. And yeah. So that was kind of,
to your credit, I think this is probably the best curating you've ever done.
Really? Oh,
yeah.
Cool. Awesome. I appreciate that.
As far as like something where if somebody, I wouldn't have come up with half of this shit. And it's the variety and like how deep we've gotten into the limits of thrash is kept me interested. So I imagine it's going to keep the listeners interested as well.
And like I said, all the feedback we've gotten is good. And Mark's a contrarian, so if he's not interested, he's going to let me know. So that's
exactly.
We'll see. We'll see if we stick the landing or not. I mean, we may have put
any of these records I haven't owned, I bought.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
So that's pretty high. That's high praise.
Yep. I noticed I put it in our Patreon page today, but someone was doing, some website or something was doing like a tournament, a voting tournament where you, of course, vote on your phones and shit, which never turns out really the right way. Like a tournament where it was the greatest one-hit wonder records of all time. In metal, like extreme metal mostly. And, they had like...
one hit or one album?
One album. Yeah, one album.
Okay.
So, they had like Gorment on there. They had,
Repulsion?
There was some stuff on there. Yeah. And the finals were... They hadn't, revealed... I think they were still voting or whatever. And I didn't vote. I just kind of saw the tournament bracket and was like, oh, that's really interesting. But they had... Repulsion in the finals versus Morbid Saint. And I was like, oh, that's why I grabbed it, because I was like, oh, no shit. Like, it's kind of weird serendipity. It's like a record you don't hear a lot about. I'm trying to find it right now to tell you some of the other bands. Let's see. Carnage made it to the Final Four. But they got... I
mean, a lot of that was re-recorded.
Yeah,
exactly.
Dismember. Who else? Ripping Corpse made it pretty far.
That's a good record. That's the one we need to talk about. I need to digest that more, and we need to talk about that record.
Yeah, that'd be a cool one. Let's see, Shrine Builder, that sort of super group of.
Is that Wino?
Wino and Buzzo, or maybe it's not. Maybe it's Dale Crover, but yeah, I mean that might have made it further just on Reputation.
Was Scott Kelly in that?
I think Scott Kelly. Yeah, it's a good record.
Okay. Yeah,
Demolich made it far.
How about Demolich is doing another record?
Yeah, well, but this was so far. Winter, and again, you have the Godin that's just come out, but technically Winter only really put out Into Darkness. Thorns made it pretty far.
Oh yeah, I always forget.
Yeah,
it's one record.
Yep, Disembowelment made it pretty far. I was happy to see Nail Bomb represent it because I love that fucking record.
I just listened to or saw a live version of them playing Wacken on YouTube.
Oh yeah,
and they basically just played the whole record.
Yeah,
it's great.
I subscribe to that record. I'd love to talk about that record.
I'd like to do a Fudge Tunnel show just about hate songs.
Nail Bomb fucking show. But yeah, so it's Repulsion and Morbid Saint in the finals. So
I'm guessing that Repulsion's going to squeak it out.
I sure hope so. I mean,
probably not much of a squeaker.
I can't think of another singular record that had more influence than Repulsion in the metal world, where like that was it, just a single like bomb dropped on multiple genres, Yeah,
I can't either.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's just funny, like they could still tour off that record like decades later, and it's still like exciting. Like that's insane to me.
I like. Well, it's interesting that a band can. I think it's a testament to the music that they wrote this shit when they were in their late teens, early 20s, and they can play it in their 50s, and it still has something else. They can like get more out of it. They can play it slightly differently. Like it's like a jazz standard being like reinterpreted every time.
Yep.
And going from like a 4-piece to a 3-piece, and it still works.
I mean, I've seen Repulsion a bunch, but that last time we saw them at the Metal Beer Festival, like when they were like doing like the Scorpion covers and shit, like I
started out with Priest.
I was just so on board with like I anything Repulsion wants to do, like at this stage, like I'll watch them do as long as it has Scott Carlson's bass tone and all those elements kind of working for it. Like I'm completely on board.
Drummers may come and go, but as long as, Matt and Scott are there.
Yep, that's it, man. That's it. So we got to get out of here, but I appreciate that. I'm glad that you're enjoying this journey as much as I am, because I've had fun deep diving into it, because, these are records like I've always wanted to know. Like I've always wanted to be more into Holy Terror, because I just know how good these records are. And I just feel like until somebody like makes me sometimes deep dive into stuff, I don't know. It's like I have to like make those decisions. Like it was, I don't know.
That's why I enjoy this show so much, is that it makes us, it's like homework, but it's not like arbitrary homework. It's not just like do these math problems. It's like, hey, you like metal. How about tell me what you think about this metal?
Sure. Yeah. I'm curious what you think about Devastation.
I've not listened to anything yet. So
yeah, I'm just curious, because here's the thing. Devastation, and Devastation is going to be the Patreon show that we're doing. Devastation's first record is fucking terrible. Like god awful. Like you go on Metal Archives, 25% average. Ooh. Like fucking
people
terrible.
Are usually pretty, tolerant,
nostalgic or whatever, but like you just go, how did this band get to idolatry? And it's amazing. Like I give them credit that they pulled their shit together and really upped the ante. And the Adultery record's fun. That's all I'll say. If you're a fan of Sepultura, I think you'll like it.
I am to a certain point.
Yeah, well, I think you're a fan of this era of Sepultura. So
okay, up until KSAD, and then after that, I don't really care.
Yep. So we're gonna close with another song from Mind Wars. We've got Christian Resistance, and it's a slammer. Lots and lots of German speed and power metal stylings, especially in the chorus on this one.
Well, here, you want my hot take?
Yeah, go ahead.
Toward the end, it sounds like, or even, I mean, I guess kind of the whole song, it sounds like the music's skipping, but the vocals aren't. They're so like weird and rhythmic, and I don't know. But then the vocals are what kind of ties everything, kind of the whole record, but the vocals kind of tie it all through.
No, there's that kind of killer breakdown sequence in the final minute it reminds me of something like Neurosis would do.
Mm-hmm.
Like that they did on like what's the song that ends? Oh my god, where the song dissolves.
Sun That Never Sets.
It's on that record. It's a song at the end. Something. I don't know.
It's not. No, Stones from the Sky is like the first.
Stones from the Sky. That's what it is.
Is that it?
Yeah, I think it's. Stones
okay.
Where it just kind of, and I'm not saying it's that epic or whatever, but it kind of has that quality where like it just kind of starts to kind of fall apart. And like you said, Dean he's on point on this song. In the middle third of this song, Christian Resistance, he's so fucking angry. I love it. Like he's like out of control. He's out of control, angry to the point where he actually for a moment loses his articulateness. And when he starts to lose his articulateness, it's like the wheels are fucking coming off, and it's used to like great effect. Like I kind of dig what they're doing here. And there's actually a song we didn't play from this record where I'm trying to think what fucking song it is. I was listening to it earlier today. Oh, Do Unto Others. Great song, but there's parts in it where he's almost singing too fast. It's almost uncomfortably fast. And I feel like he touches that in Christian Resistance, but like only just briefly in that middle part, and it's just enough that's like awesome. And then right when like the wheels are about to come off, these twin fucking leads kind of like come into like one of the best solos on the whole record, just jaw-dropping. And just a cool fucking song. I mean, like there's like Halloween kind of moments in the chorus, like Angel Dust kind of moments, that German speed metal stuff, especially in the chorus here. But it's a good way to go out for sure. So and I'm glad that you're enjoying this, and that we finally got to kind of crack the code on Holy Terror. I don't know. I think we're like in the boat like with Wagner. I don't know. I feel like every time I'm going to put this record on, I discover like, oh yeah, this song. Oh fuck, I never heard that part. That's kind of
it feels like one of those records where you could, depending on where you're at, like mentally, at the time, you could have completely different reads of it. because I'm in a pretty even emotional state right now, so it reads a certain way. But if I was like really pissed off, angry mood, I think this would have even a different effect.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
I think that might be kind of one of the keys to like a good album, or like an album that kind of can transcend than just being like, a banger.
Yeah, I feel like we mentioned Neurosis. Neurosis is sort of a band that like hits you at different moods depending on where you're at, you know what I mean? And like where your mindset is and stuff like that. Yeah,
that Sun That Never Sets show that we did, that's one of my favorite shows we ever did.
Oh God. Yeah.
That just because we just kept going back, and I don't know, it just felt like we never had enough to say about it.
Yep. No, that was fun. And that's why I like doing like a Neurosis show like every so often, just
every 3-4 years.
Yeah, just to sort of like, like take some time, really digest it, not force it. Like to do like a Neurosis 3-parter or something like that, like I can't wrap my head around that. You know what I mean? Like it just
I'd like to go back to some of the early records.
Oh yeah, that'd be
just
fun.
Do a single episode on, Pain of Mind or something.
Yeah, I mean, I'm up for Neurosis whenever, because they're just, again, because it forces me to like kind of go there, and I think sometimes Neurosis is they can be emotionally draining, but that's okay. Like it's like I was talking about, watching, Come and See. And then like that movie, that Russian movie, like if I'm mentally ready for it, like I'm up for the challenge. I just need like the push, I just watched actually last weekend, The Fisher King, and I hadn't seen that since I was real young.
I used to like it when I was younger, but I haven't seen it in years.
And man, like I got really emotional with Robin Williams in that.
That's Terry Gilliam movie, isn't it?
Yeah, it's an incredible movie, like really good. Like I think you probably saw it when you were young, and I saw it when I was young because
I saw it in my 20s.
Okay, you saw it in your 20s. Okay, so I saw it like when it came out, like 90. So I think like my aunt and uncle and my mom like rented it, and like I was kind of like half into it, but it was like I couldn't get it. You know what I mean? Like something I was missing, but man,
I went back to it because I'm just a big fan of his work.
Yeah,
in general, and I was like, oh shit, he did this.
Yeah,
okay, I like Jeff Bridges. I'll try it.
Yeah, no, I mean it's great, and I mean I guess in hindsight, like watching that performance and then knowing like what happened with Robin Williams, I just was like, it sort of hit me. I was like, oof, man, I got choked up a little bit during some parts and stuff, just kind of thinking about the performance that he did and like where he was going to go from there. And
it kind of, if you watch any of his movies now after he's passed, they all have more emotional resonance.
Yeah, there's like
you can see that fragility in him,
melancholiness that's kind of floating over those performances. Like hiding.
Yeah, even go back to like what the fuck, the Garp movie, World According to Garp.
Yeah,
it's all there.
Yeah, and that's a real famous book that was based off of John, I think, who also wrote Cider House Rules. I think it was the same guy that wrote both books. So. But yeah, and interesting. I mean, I saw World According to Garp when I was way too young. And, that blowjob scene like really like freaked me out because I was like, "What's going on?" Like
I saw the trailer. I thought it was just gonna be funny, and I was like, "Jesus."
Pretty heavy duty. So, but speaking of heavy duty, we're on our way out here. So, let us know your thoughts. Like I said, we do like to share some thoughts, especially as people are kind of discovering these bands as much as we kind of are. So shoot us an email at requiempodcast@gmail.com. Check out old episodes. I've been posting a lot of old episodes today in honor of Chuck's passing and things like that. You can go to requiemmetal.com and find the first 160 episodes. So all the stuff, if you subscribe through Spotify or Apple Music or whatever podcast thing you use, you'll know that they're, I think we starts at episode like 152 or something like that. So you can find those first ones on the website. You can also go to the website and sign up to be a patron. We do appreciate people who want to support what we're doing because we are doing some pretty deep dives into this stuff, and it does require a lot of time and energy, and we're happy to do it. But we also are, it's like I said, we don't get paid to do this. So,
well, and yeah, also this time, if this sweetens the deal, not sweetens the deal, but this is the time of year when our website gets renewed. So that's like 100 and a couple and change, and like our I think our domain name is coming up. So they're like these little things that helps kind of take care of, so you don't have to worry about it.
Absolutely. And we're going to record a Patreon show. So if you like this Thrash series, you can get the Flotsam and Jetsam episode that we did. That was the last one we did. And we're going to be doing a Devastation adultery sort of episode. So the only way you can get access to those is to become a patron. So,
and that's a good, probably 30 hours of content right there?
At least. Yeah. Yeah. Between all the patron shows.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. Because we're starting to build a little nest egg of some patron stuff up there. I did share speaking of Chuck's passing, I did share the interview with people just again, as like kind of a free thing, because I got a chance for people that are new to the show to my very first interview was with Chuck. So on the Sound of Perseverance tour, which sadly he was touring, I think, with Nevermore on that tour. Or was it Hammerfall? I'm trying to remember.
I think it was Hammerfall.
Was Hammerfall. I saw Nevermore with another band on like around that same time.
Okay. I never saw Hammerfall. Last time I saw Death was Symbolic.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Because you didn't go to the '98 Metal Fest with us.
No.
You got in Philly, and that's when I first saw Death, and then they came back through on a full Sound of Perseverance tour. And so. Hanging out in the van, talking to Chuck about stuff. It was cool, or the tour bus. I mean, not the van. But yeah, you can check us out on Facebook, check us out on Twitter, all those kind of places, Instagram, all the social media and whatnot. But most of all, like I said, we want people who want to be patrons and want to give us some good feedback and leave us an iTunes ratings too, or Apple Music ratings or whatever the hell they call it. I think I'm going to call it iTunes till like the end of time.
I didn't realize that the iTunes whole branding had changed since they did their rollout of their service.
Yeah, it's like DT and Pine Knob for me. It's like the same thing.
It'll always be Pine Knob.
It's always gonna be Pine Knob, exactly.
Even for when David Coverdale came out, he made mention of that.
He knows. I mean, yeah. Baby, we're here. We're White Snake, baby. So, yeah.
Anything that can sound like a euphemism for a penis, David Coverdale will remember.
Exactly. So, if I was black, we'd be called Black Snake, baby. Great quote. God damn it. I love you, David Coverdale. Don't ever stop being you. David Coverdale on Twitter is actually pretty awesome. So
I follow him on YouTube as well.
Okay. He
calls
good
everybody
Twitter.
darlings.
Yeah. You know who the best Twitter account though is the Iron Sheik. His updates on a daily basis are inspiring. Where he just like calls out motherfuckers all the time. It's really
he's got a lot of anger right now.
Yeah. Yep. The Iron Sheik, man, he's just letting it out. So, but for the Iron Sheik and Holy Terror and Jeff Wagner and Christian Resistance from Mind Wars
and Keith Dean, rest in peace, brother.
Dean, and Chuck, rest in peace, and Sean Malone, rest in peace.
Jesus.
And,
it's been too long.
Hashtag 2020. We're almost there. We're almost but yeah, enjoy Christian Resistance. So for Requiem Metal Podcast, I am Jason.
And I'm Mark.
Cool.